advisory committees on permitting and planning. And I would like to now call the meeting, and we're going to start with roll call.
For roll call, I believe the parish president would like to make some introductions.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and most importantly, thank you for being part of this task force, because I know it's been a tremendous amount of work, and I think we're going to have really good things happen from it. I wanted to just update you on some administrative changes that we have done, and we finally almost completed. As you know, if you've heard, Steve was our chief operating officer, and he retired early this year. And I said, let me take the opportunity to look at the organization and maybe do some fine tuning to it. So the council approved for me to have 2 chief operating officers, because that's a burnout position. You know, it's a very large organization, 43 departments, a lot of night work, a lot of weekend work. I didn't want to put another person in there just to burn out. So with that, we have 2 chief operating officers. I wanted to introduce Mark Drews and Shireen Gaggenheimer. So what we've kind of done is split the organization in 2. We call it a first call. So I've asked both of them to kind of really pay attention with detail to 23 departments each, but both of them to be knowledgeable about big things. But the beauty of that, when you promote Mark, you got to fill Mark's position, and you get a kind of effect of bringing a lot of other people up. So when Mark was promoted, we've asked Angela, you know Angela, right there you go, Angela DeSoto, to take over the Public Works Director. And then with Angela's promotion, we get to do another promotion with Matthew Zarang as the Director of Engineering. So Matthew might be somebody you don't know, so I wanted Juliet to make sure y'all want to know who Matthew is. And Matthew was the Assistant Director of Engineering, and he has 17 years of experience with our administration. So we've done a lot of those moves throughout, probably 12 different moves like that. And we have a lot of experienced people moving up to take on bigger responsibilities. It's brought really a lot of new energy to our administration, and I hope that lets us finish strong in the less than 2 years that I have. So with that, thank you. Matthew Zarang is your new Director of Engineering. Okay, thanks.
Roll call, please state whether you're present or whether you're filling in for someone else. Stacy Alessandra.
Present.
Rusty Autry.
Present.
Jerry Bologna.
Present.
John Cerruti.
Here.
Jeff Charlotte.
Here.
Adam Chimner.
Here.
Donovan Duffy.
Here.
Bob Grace. Brian Lade. Ruth Lawson.
Here.
Jim Martin. Chance Miller.
Good morning. Here.
Frank Morse.
Here.
Will Place. Charles Silvernagel.
Here.
Peter Spera.
Here.
Bert Turner. Vincent Bastola. That completes the roll.
All right, now we have the approval of the minutes from the January 15, 26. Hearing nothing, minutes stand as approved. Juliet?
Good morning. We have with us, joining us via Teams, our consultants Barry Dunn, who came and met with you all during the January meeting of the advisory committee. They have an update for you this morning of the research they have done to date. So I'm going to turn this over to them. Give me just a second. We found this morning that the room works so that you can hear them over the speakers, but they may or may not be able to hear you very well using the room microphones. So if when we get to the part of this where you have the opportunity to ask any questions, if we have some difficulty, we're gonna finagle, make it work, but it may involve literally passing a laptop around the room. So we will have to do it one at a time, speaking into the laptop if we can't make the microphones work. So just give us a little patience as we see if we can make this work for us this morning. So with that, I'm going to introduce Carrie Ouellette and Sam Eisenbiter, who were here with us in person. And let's see, their mics are still muted. So hopefully they're listening and will join us back in just a second. There's Carrie. And there's Sam. So good morning. We are ready for you guys. And I think last time we talked, you had some graphics, some presentation you were going to do. So we'll go ahead and let you share the screen. And the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just gonna share my screen, and please let me know if you cannot see the graphic. Are you seeing the presentation now?
We're good.
Okay, great. So we're going to give you an overview of what we've been doing so far. We'll talk through the process diagrams that we've developed in the last month or so, provide a summary of the peer community analysis that was done and give you some takeaways from that, and then have some time for discussing next steps and questions. So please feel free to interrupt as we go along if you do have questions. Just wanted to give you an update on what we've done. Last time we saw you in person, we were conducting fact-finding meeting with both staff and external stakeholders, understanding processes and challenges in the process. Building off of that, we documented the process diagrams. We also had a couple of in-person focus group discussions with external stakeholders, as well as some virtual meetings to wrap that up following those meetings in person in January. The as-is process diagrams really documenting each step of the process for staff, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And through that, really getting into the details of the process. Part of that exercise is to identify opportunities for improvement, which you'll see in a minute. We were able to review those diagrams with staff to what we heard, and then as we were doing that process, we were also conducting that peer community research, which we'll get into in more detail. So the as-is process diagrams, just to give you an overview of what we've done. On the right, you see the processes that we mapped: residential permit, commercial permit, trade permit, inspections process, violations, and then the work that the code compliance and enforcement does. Our team uses the business process model and notation standards for diagramming. I won't get into the details of that, but just noting that we have specific standards that are intended to present a format that is readable, has the ability to capture complex processes and those process relationships, and documenting each task along the way, as well as the roles, departments responsible, and noting how communication happens, which is a big part of information that we gathered through our meetings. Again, this is an example. I'm not, Julia, did this team see the diagrams? Yeah. Not.
No, we have,
Okay.
the participants in the advisory committee have not seen your diagrams, which are much clearer and better than the diagram we initially showed you at the very beginning of this process, I will freely admit. This is a much clearer, in-depth diagram versus what we all finally called the spaghetti model from the very first meeting.
So we're not going to go through each diagram. They are quite lengthy, but I just wanted to give you an overview of the level of detail that we provided. And I think that if you're interested in looking at that detail, I think that can be arranged. So for each process, this is the residential building permit process. At the top, we have the high-level steps in the process, and then each of those, we can see the little plus sign, is broken out into a sub-process. So this first sub-process, the application intake, is fairly simple compared to some of the other sub-processes that are mapped out with many more departments and many more arrows moving in different directions. But just to show you what we've captured, the level of detail, we have tasks here in each rectangle, what the task is, who's responsible, the colors represent departments, the role is indicated in each task. And then in the black here, text, there is some additional detail as needed, clarification detail, and then those red callouts are opportunities for improvement, things we think are could use some improvement, whether it's something that is happening manually or something that is where there might be a gap or inconsistency across departments, things like that. So this shows the full process, where there are decisions, that's where that diamond is, and then the method of communication. So we have the email if it's a manual email, or a different symbol if it's an automation from the system. So we can see where there are things that are where there are manual processes happening, where there is potential room for error and room for improvement. So I know that is a lot of information. I wasn't planning to go through the diagrams. I can pull that up if Juliet, if you think that would be helpful, but wanted to just stop here for a minute and see if there are any questions on just broadly on what we've done with the diagramming.
I'll just ask the room, are you interested in seeing any more specifics from any of the diagrams, or is this sort of enough to know these are the ones that they mapped out, this is the level of detail that we now have regarding these processes? And I think sort of the most important part, as Carrie mentioned, is what's in red, where they've identified opportunities to improve this part of the process, or why this is a stumbling block. And so we have these very clear diagrams that, as Carrie will get into, will then ultimately inform the recommendations that they make, and the final work product being, of course, the implementation of how we make these improvements.
I don't know about everybody in the room, but I can't see any of that. So maybe they can email it to us or something?
Yes, so what we can do, Carrie, it is a little difficult because they all chose to sit in the back of the room this morning instead of sitting up front. But we do have versions of these, and so for one thing, we generally post the presentation itself to the advisory committee's webpage, so this presentation will be made available. But if you all would like to see the minute detail of this, we can certainly share these diagrams with you as well, because that's product that Very Dunn has already provided to us.
Maybe could we quickly just go through one?
Do you have a preference for which one?
It's the middle? No, it doesn't matter. The easiest one.
She might be able to blow it up a little bit too. What would
Just
you
to get
do?
the basic ideas of.
So Carrie, they're asking if you could just kind of walk through, and maybe even just this one on the screen, a little bit in depth so that they can kind of see what it was that, the details rather than just sort of kind of the overview of decision point. So,
Juliet, you might be able to make that like a full screen too, to where we maybe.
I don't know, I will see.
We're gonna try to get it printed. This is too, y'all can't see that. We're gonna try to get it printed for you.
Focus on content. I don't think that makes it that much bigger for you guys.
I'll pull up the file, and that might be helpful to see it and read. You just bear with me for a minute.
Yeah, we can read like the top of the PDF clearly. It's the text in red. So even if you zoomed into, and zoomed into the PDF, we probably see it.
Donovan, I don't think she's going to be able to hear you unless you speak directly into the mic. So it's going to be very important that you guys utilize your table mics and pass them around, because that's going to be the best opportunity for Sam and Carrie to be able to hear you when you have comments or things, unless we want to spend the entire meeting to be repeating what y'all are saying.
Yeah, it's much better when you zoom in.
Okay, so that you can read
No?
I can't, I don't know
generally,
if you guys.
and again, I don't want to go through all the details. There's a lot of text on each of these. I think it'd be probably worthwhile if you are interested to look through the whole document after this meeting, really read through it, but just to give you a more in-depth look. So this is the overall process, the application intake, the plan review process, and then the permit issuance and approval are the three primary steps, and then those are each broken down here. So we looked at the application intake. We also have the system views documented here. So for intake, it's all happening through MGO. So that's a good thing. There's nothing happening outside of the system. So the blue here is the applicant's submitting. We noted some opportunities where the applicants have challenges with the portal, challenges understanding what the requirements are. Then it goes to the building permit supervisor for the completeness check. And then here's where we have a decision point where is the application complete or not, or is a variance required or not, and that kind of forms that loop of the department provides comments, the applicant has to resubmit, and I think what we found here is this part is where there's sometimes a big lag, both for application intake and plan review, where there's been a delay in getting information back or a lack of understanding of what those requirements are. And then the last part of that is assigning that, once it's complete, to the plan reviewer. So this double circle indicates a midpoint of a process, and then the final, this is the start of the process, and the final is the dark circle. And then zoom out so you can see the full scale of this. So we have, because of the complexity of the process, we have sub-processes. So this is the sub-process of the BZA, and as you can see here, there are a lot of little steps here happening, most of which are handled by the BZA admin assistant, but there's some back and forth with the building permits department and coordination with the applicant. And the plan review, we separated out each review by department, and I think that really represents well that these departments are reviewing things separately. It's happening concurrently, but they have their own processes. They all look somewhat different and are really separate from what's happening in the building permit. And it does flow back to building permits, but these department reviews happening separately, and there's some lack of coordination there as far as consistency across departments. I don't want to start reading from the screen, but are there any questions generally about the diagrams?
So this is something that applicants would see, or is this just for internal?
This is an internal work product of Veridun's process so that they can see where our pain points are. These are the results of those fact-finding discussions they had back in January when they met with all of you. They met with basically every person in the building permits department participating in one of these discussions relative to their expertise within the department. They had meetings with engineering, they had meetings with the planning department, they had meetings with code compliance and enforcement. We also had them meet with the fire department, with environmental affairs. Every department in the parish who plays a role in the permitting process participated in the conversations with Veridun so that they could get to this level of detail, so that they could, have a point that says for parkways, where's Chance? For the MRTPD, this is the entire mapping of what happens if your project has to involve the arborist and the parkways department doing the MRTPD review. So this is just applicable to a very small subset of permits, but they're still capturing that information as part of their understanding of the entire global world of the permitting process in Jefferson Parish. And so you can see,
So the applicant won't,
this is
See,
not
like,
some, this
a
is not
roadmap
intended
following.
necessarily for the applicant. I think that where this will go is this will tell us what do we need to be better providing information to the applicant. So we know we need to resolve the applicant part of the process, right? So clearly there is communication lacking for applicants to understand what they need to do to start, what documents they need to do to start. So that's in red as an OFI, opportunity for improvement. That tells us we need to solve that piece of the puzzle. Other pieces, in looking at this diagram, it also is an opportunity to say, well, wait, why do we have these additional steps? What is that additional step doing or solving? So that's the purpose of these diagrams. This is really work product for Barry Dunn and then ultimately for us as the parish to really see very clearly laid out all the little minute steps that we know happen, but you don't always think about it when you're describing the process, right? We talk in big picture when you're trying to communicate the process, but this really helps us get down to that micro detail. And as we discussed, they have done this for specifically our trades application. So if you're just doing mechanical or a gas or a plumbing filing, we have that process mapped out. If you are doing a residential application, if you're doing a commercial application, if you get a violation, what happens from the time of getting your violation to getting the building permit that's necessary to clear it? How do we make sure that those systems are talking to each other with the violations process and the building permitting process? So that's what these diagrams are. These will form a part of Barry Dunn's final report to us on recommendations for overall improvements. And then, as I said, this will be part of the implementation that they assist us with as the final part of their contract.
is it possible to get something? Is it possible to get something to show the applicant so they can kind of have like a roadmap of how I start and how I get to the finish? And not super
So the other thing I
detailed,
want to
but just-
emphasize, John, is this is the as-is diagramming. So I don't think that this is something we want necessarily at this point to share with applicants. What we want is the end result diagramming, the good diagram that shows people, and I think that is certainly something, Carrie, the question was, is this something we can share with applicants so that they can know what the steps are? And I think when we get to what we want the map to be and the changes we've made to get to that good map, then yes, I think that is a product that can be part of that communication to the public and to applicants to say, this is the process in Jefferson Parish.
So, two things. So that was part of the decision tree that we talked about many
Yes.
moons ago. The second thing is, how did they come up with the selected permits? Was it because of some issues that those permits had, or is it just a random?
So Carrie, Frank is asking how we came up with this list of permits to map. So I don't know if you want to address that?
I know there are many different permit types. Generally, they mostly fall into commercial, residential, or trade. I know within those, that list, there are some variations, but for the most part, these are kind of general processes, understanding there's some variation, but I think that's also a good point in that maybe there doesn't need to be that many permit types. Maybe if the process is the same for these 10 residential permit types, that could be consolidated. So that's one thing that we may talk about later on. So these are intended to cover up the broad range of the work that the department does, the parish does, with regard to permitting. I did also want to note that us mapping out diagrams and working with the parish staff to really detail these processes, that's where these opportunities for improvement are really evident when we start putting that on paper. So it's a really important exercise for our work product, but also can be used as a tool to, as Juliet mentioned, to modify for future state or revised process diagrams for the future, and then you have them mapped out. I think most people haven't seen this laid out, or I don't think anyone in staff had seen that, the processes laid out in this detail to really understand what's happening beyond their one role. So that's where you get a better understanding of the overall process. That's helpful to help applicants to understand what communication needs to happen internally. Having that mapped out with your current processes is a useful tool.
Yeah, I have an observation I want to share at this point. Once we map this out, the intended outcome, once we do get this mapped out, it has more purpose mapped out than just for the applicant, at least in my opinion. It would be also to guide the parish departments and being able to communicate with that applicant, and they themselves could see where, if there is a problem, where that problem is, and to direct the applicant appropriately to make her applicant the applicant.
Bruce is just reiterating that this provides a map useful for both applicants and parish, that as they communicate through the process, it provides a guide to say, this is where you are in the process, and these are the things that we're coming up next.
And there may be some new staff within Jefferson Parish that would also benefit from this roadmap.
And also a good training document for
Yes.
new employees.
Absolutely. I think this is really helpful internally. I think some modification of this would be useful for applicants. I think the level of detail might be more than what typical applicant would need to see, but I think it would be a good pull detail from this to create a guide or a process map for applicants.
Okay, we have any more discussion on the process diagramming?
No, I mean, I had that question, I think you kind of answered it, but, you know, to reiterate, I do think it's really important when this is cleaned up that it's shared with applicants and internally, so that everyone's on the same page. Again, you know, they can see the process and understand it.
So what we will tell Barry Dunn is that as part of our final work product, we would like an applicant-friendly version of what is the goal process, not the problem process.
Right. Understood.
That will be part of our final work product request.
Yeah.
One more question, Adam.
I know Barry Dunn heard from your team and from us and came up with this, but did they not secret shop, or kind of go through it themselves to find that our comments, your staff's comments, kind of match what they found as an outsider?
So to that discussion, we literally just a week ago sat down with Latrice and Carrie and her team kind of walked through what an applicant sees on MGO. We have given them accounts in MGO so that they can do exactly that, create their own applications. The question, Carrie, was whether or not you had secret shopped the application process by going through it yourselves to see what the citizen in Jefferson Parish experiences when they are trying to make an application. So I was explaining that you have walked through MGO with Latrice, asked specific questions that came out of your observations of MGO, your discussions regarding developing the process diagrams. So I think that answered that. Okay. All right, in that case, I think we're ready to move on from I'm going to reiterate, as is, process diagrams, and talk about the next things that you all have been evaluating.
Great. Okay, so we, as I mentioned, we conducted a peer community analysis. Let's see. So we identified, along with the parish project management team, 3 other communities to look at as comparison. So East Baton Rouge Parish, which includes City of Baton Rouge, Lafayette Parish, and St. Tammany Parish. I just want to note, this was not a complete review of those jurisdictions, processes, and evaluation of that. We had some trouble getting all of the information we needed from each parish, but we have some information to show as comparison. But part of what our final final report will include is a look at best practices across the country in other communities. And that we look at related to specific recommendations where, for example, we were talking with Latrice about the decision tree functionality that they are working to implement, and we have some great examples of where that is working really well, and that you can go and actually look at and walk through that. So things like that where communities are have implemented certain processes or programs where that's happening well. I would say just because a jurisdiction here that we've looked at as a peer community is doing something differently doesn't necessarily mean that is the best way to do that, or that it's better than what Jefferson Parish is doing, but it provides a point of comparison. We recognize there are some differences in size, scale, and the type of development, as well as some unique geographical characteristics that really impact what requirements are and regulations are in each community. So here's an overview of things that we looked at across those communities, so different review requirements, separate processes, staffing and timelines, as well as other programs and requirements like third-party inspectors. We did not hear back from one department, so there are some gaps in this analysis. We're still trying to get that information, but it's all dependent on what departments are willing to provide to us. This provides some insight here whether Jefferson Parish's requirements are significantly above and beyond other communities, but not necessarily that those communities are the standard or should be the standard that Jefferson Parish is held to. We started looking at just the comparing metrics across departments. I will note the population served is, as best we could interpret, based on the jurisdictional information that those departments cover. And there are some variations in the departments and what their makeup includes, what roles and responsibilities each department has. As you can see, some Jefferson Parish's building permits department is just that building permits, while other departments include planning functions as well. So that accounts for some of the variation in budget and staff. Also noting that East Baton Rouge Parish contracts with South Central Planning and Development Commission, so that's most likely why they have a lower number of staff there. And then again, across the work volume, Jefferson Parish has a high number of permits. We didn't get a complete number from Lafayette Parish, just the way that they've broken down permit numbers. That 859 only accounts for new construction. And then here we have a comparison of review times. Some of this was provided to us by building department directors. Other information was pulled from websites based on what their standard is. So whether that is what's actually happening is not clear. You can see Jefferson Parish is a bit higher, but not out of the realm of what is realistic, especially when you're looking at commercial permit review. And then we have some of the parishes noted time for initial review, and I think what Jefferson Parish is doing related to that initial completeness review is comparable.
I'm happy
Turn it over
to.
to Sam to talk about review requirements.
Thanks, Carrie. So I just want to go into a handful of the facets in terms of what we saw for comparison purposes. And to reiterate what Carrie said, is that it's not that the other comparison, our peer communities have established an unimpeachable standard, but instead, there's just differences that then would reflect on really what would be the next phase of potential recommendations for Jefferson Parish. And really the overall takeaway that I think you'll see from this handful of comparisons is that Jefferson Parish is not radically different in terms of the core information that it's asking applicants to submit. It's just the process is made more complex when there are additional review requirements locally, additional special districts, and then additional or more sensitive local thresholds. And then when those are all layered onto that core permit process, it adds complexity to an already complex process. So here's an example as a starting point. In terms of zoning clearances, the peers do not generally require a separate zoning clearance application. Instead, they're typically folding that review into either a building permit, a site plan, or occupancy review. So it's incorporated or integrated. Also, when you look at fire review, St. Tammany is an example. They're relying entirely on the Office of State Fire Marshal for fire review. So it's something that's completely outside of their process. And then special districts, and as Carrie pointed out, there are geographic differences that, cannot be really escaped or avoided. But it's just a matter of noting that these special districts then just add one more layer of complexity for the user. So the levy districts, the Metairie Ridge tree protection, and then the neighborhood conservation district. Next slide, Carrie, if you would. So this one takes a look at additional reviews and permits that are required. So generally, there's a similarity across all four jurisdictions. You can see the commonality among the top issues that are listed there: engineering, traffic, drainage, water, and sewer. But in terms of additional requirements, so Jefferson Parish and then East Baton Rouge require an environmental review that's additional. And then when it comes to driveway permits, again, similarly, St. Tammany is incorporating that into the process, whereas the other Jefferson Parish and the other peers are requiring, to some degree, a separate driveway permit. Next one, Carrie. Thank you. So this specific slide actually shows some additional residential submission requirements. So these are all going to go above and beyond the standard requirements, baseline items for residential submission. Those standard baseline items are site plan, construction plans, floor plans, framing details, and the like. So as you can see, Jefferson Parish is not the only peer that adds additional submission requirements for residential permits. And they definitely vary, and they're always going to vary in terms of the lift on the part of the applicant, the level of complexity. But every time you do add additional, that is something that needs to be a point of focus when you're trying to convey those those unique set of requirements to the applicant and try to streamline that process. So besides just understanding the additional complexity added by new layers of requirements, it's also a matter of translating that to, is there another way that this can be conveyed to the applicant that's more streamlined? The next slide shows a little bit of an example here. So I know you can't read it, but just as an example, that graphic shows East Baton Rouge and their general list that gets sent out or is available to applicants for residential applications. So Jefferson Parish and similarly St. Tammany, it's not really as comprehensive of a list of plan details. And anytime that there's something that's not specifically targeted towards the user, there's an opportunity to consolidate that information in a way that's more readily understood and hopefully can address the issues that were found, which is with regards to the completion the degree to which the submissions are complete when they're initially brought from the applicant. Next slide, Carrie, if you would. So now this talks a little bit about commercial submission requirements. Again, generally similar across all the peers with regards to review by engineering, fire, septic, sewer, drainage, traffic, and landscaping. So as a couple of examples, East Baton Rouge is bringing on some additional requirements surrounding their trades plans, and other statements that are required, similar to Lafayette Parish, some additional requirements. So what this is suggesting is that Jefferson's parish overall, specifically for commercial, is not unusual in terms of the general breadth of the technical review, but it's just a matter of how is the information structured in a way that the user can readily understand what is required at the outset. Next slide, Carrie. Thanks. So now this specific slide talks about some findings that were revealed with regards to specific to Jefferson Parish requirements. And in the cases where there were some thresholds that exceeded the other parishes. So in the case of the requirement that plans are stamped, Jefferson Parish is going above and beyond. The thresholds are a little more sensitive in terms of that requirement as compared to the state requirements. Most of the other peer communities are abiding by those state requirements, whereas Jefferson Parish is requiring a design professional stamp for some other minor residential projects such as fences. Similarly, elevator certification is a requirement that is unique to Jefferson Parish. Third-party inspectors, I know that's something that the parish is looking at, but as it stands, it's a registration requirement that's unique to Jefferson Parish. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, special districts and overlay zones, there are more with Jefferson Parish than the other peer communities. So this is really an overview of the kinds of things that we were able to glean from this review. And, as I mentioned, the takeaways that will now lead us to a sense of some recommendations that should see some positive impacts. Are there permit or approval processes that could be either streamlined or incorporated into other elements to avoid what you might refer to as a kind of a separate review pathway? If you think about the way that those the diagrams that Carrie showed us show, is it breaking out from a core path, or is it just one more step along the way? Similarly, taking a look at something like thresholds for design review by professionals, requirements for stamping, can that be evaluated? Then when you take a look at submission requirements, in terms of providing details to the applicants, is there a way to make that as comprehensive as possible, but also as readily accessible as possible? Because overall, submission requirements for Jefferson Parish for plan review are not substantially greater than those of the other parishes. It's just as we've discussed, things like more sensitive thresholds and special districts and additional review pathways, they all add that level of complexity. And that's how Jefferson Parish stands out largely. That was largely the extent of the things we wanted to cover. We're happy to answer some questions as well.
Sam, I just wanted to note, for things like the threshold for requiring a design professional and other requirements, I think it's important to look at those, but there may be a reason why those requirements are set, and so it's not necessarily something that is going to impact the review time. So for example, if a homeowner hires a design professional, that process is usually a lot easier and a lot faster. It costs more for the homeowner, so that's something to balance. But I know that hearing from staff, a challenge is when homeowners don't know what the requirements are, don't understand the process, that can cause a lot of delays and frustration on both the staff and applicants. So a lot of things to consider, not just kind of trying to reduce requirements across the board, but thinking about how that impacts both staff and applicants in the overall process.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Carrie. Certainly. So, the idea is, to what degree there are additional requirements, it establishes a need to make sure that that's clearly conveyed at the outset. And really, that may be the opportunity to streamline the process, especially with regards to application intake. Again, as you said, if it turns out that the exact specifications are really essential and maybe beneficial in a way, as you said, being different from the other peers doesn't make the other peers to have a higher standard necessarily. It's just a difference in the way they operate.
So
Special district.
we were just going to talk about next steps, but any questions on the peer community research?
Terry, do you have a question?
I don't think this is really for Barry Dunn, but Juliet, the special districts, those are created by ordinance.
Yes.
Like-
Yes, all of our zoning districts were created by ordinance at some point or another since 1958. And that is why the work that Camiros and the entire rewrite of the zoning code is such an important project, because right now we have two different, what we'll call major commercial corridor beautification zoning districts, right? The CPZ and the MUC. We have two different districts that are mapped on both East Bank and West Bank, but they have minute differences. And so a design professional really has to know, wait, is the MUC applicable to this property, or is the CPZ applicable to this property when they are preparing a proposal, instead of having one commercial corridor beautification zoning overlay. It's that layers and layers of complexity that, Bucktown has its own zoning district, Fat City had its own zoning district. When we had the request to look at a district for, say, David Drive, we had to ask ourselves, do we create the David Drive zoning district, or instead we chose to go with what we're calling the town center mixed use, and instead of, again, having a fourth or fifth geographic specific zoning district, we started trying to come into these more character-based zoning districts that could be applied, whether it's David Drive, whether it's you're trying to achieve that similar outcome in Bucktown. So, but again, that all led to the realization, and I think, when the parish president held up the book of zoning, well, two books of zoning, that really kind of shows you we have legislated ourselves to this level of complexity. And so that will be a big part of the undertaking that Camiros will do, is how do we bring that back down to something that's manageable, yet achieves the goals of our community, both residential, civic, and commercial, economic.
Aren't there some groups that have to require approval before they get to the council?
Yes.
So is there going to be one willingness and appetite for, I guess, the administration to propose and then the council to approve, getting rid of some of these special districts?
Look, that is part of, that's why the rewrite of the zoning district is a 2-year process. That is a lot of community conversation from every stakeholder in Jefferson Parish. And that's why it's so important that you all, as representatives of your groups, that's why you're here, you need to represent an entity that has a role in development. That's why you go back and you communicate to your chamber members, come to the listening sessions, come to the open houses, come to the public meetings. Communicate that to your civic association where you live as residents of Jefferson Parish. This is your opportunity to have a voice in the future development of our parish, what this looks like for your children and your grandchildren. And it is so important that we have as many people participate in this process, and that one small set of voices doesn't set a path that the rest of us all are going to have to live under, or worse, we get a zoning code adopted, and the very next council meeting, a council person calls a study to change it, to fix one tiny little thing, to solve one little problem. So it's a start, it's an opportunity to start with a fresh slate, but I think it's also an opportunity to have those conversations. Should we be amending our zoning ordinance 4 times, 5 times a year to solve these individual problems, or is there a better process for getting the results we want?
And I think we can all stress the importance of our members and you all to go to public meetings. And I think we all know what ends up happening is at the last minute when things are really getting nailed down is when people show up. So I don't know if there's a way to bring the council on board on this too, to where we're not having, 50 civic organizations show up at the last meeting in which we're adopting the ordinances. Meet with the individual special districts or meet with the individual civic associations, but really bringing them on board too, to where we're not having that issue of kind of fighting it out at the last meeting.
So a significant part of Camaris's task in this UDC rewrite is developing what we're calling a neighborhood engagement plan, and that is helping the parish identify how do we better have those conversations early in the process, exactly to your point, rather than at the PAB hearing, or worse, even at the council meeting, when it's already gone through such a process. We've all seen that happen too, where they show up at the council level and there's been no real activity at the Planning Advisory Board, which is the intent of that Planning Advisory Board body, to provide those opportunities for discussions before it gets to the council level. And look, it's a big conversation to be had, whether or not the council should be making the decisions on variances to things like landscaping. Should that be delegated to the Board of Zoning Adjustment, which is already an existing quasi-judicial body? Should there be... So those are all conversations that need to happen as part of this UDC rewrite, because it's not just the zoning proscription of 3 trees, 60 square feet, whatever, but it is also the processes that you have to follow that are part of the zoning code.
And I know it's not for y'all's lack of trying to get people to show up. That's just the way it is.
Yeah. All right.
Wait, I got it. But as an architect, I understand that the need for these different overlays, because every corridor could be a little bit different. And it's our task to understand and being able to interpret all of these. But it also goes back to our overview where we stress in that pre-application meeting to meet with the departments of the parish, and then at that point you get a clear understanding of the direction that you're going in. And it also helps us as design professionals to understand and to produce the document, but it also helps the parish on the end of their review time. If they know that this document, you've been working on this project, you've been communicating with them early, they know that now their review doesn't take those weeks to complete, because you've already had, you got a 5-foot setback, you got a 10-foot buffer, you got these special requirements that you have to deal with, and your site plan comes in correct, and you're not having to go back and forth with the agencies at a 90% complete set of documents, 100% complete. You already worked that out in the beginning.
So I have 2 questions.
Into the mic, please.
Oh, sorry. Is that good? Okay, so I have 2 questions. The first, is the parish working on a public communication plan? To Ruth's point, do we have a plan in place? Like, how are we going to get all this out to the public in advance and we can have public input?
On the UDC or in general?
It's just in general, just so like she's saying, like we go through all this and then it comes before the council, and then that's when people come out, when it's ready to be voted on, then the people come out and voice their concerns.
Yes, so
like how do we?
so that is a big part of the UDC. our staff has had several discussions with members of the administration outside of the planning department, with the public information office, with some of our outreach coordinators of how do we get this sort of ground level and get people involved in this process early on. So yes, that is a big thing that we are aware of and doing our best on. And that's why the development of a neighborhood engagement plan was such a significant part of our scope when we put out for a consultant. We knew up front we needed to resolve this engagement piece. How are we reaching people who aren't just following it on Facebook or the parish's traditional social media? Is email to civic associations getting beyond the one person who may or may not be getting those emails? So how do we take those additional steps and figure out where to engage the people where they are in this process? As far as the very done process and the improvements that we're working on making, we've been trying to find that balance between how do we communicate the process that nobody likes versus waiting until we've got a better process in place and then putting out information on, hey, this is our new process, it works really well, here's what you need to do. So I don't want to spend too much of our energy creating a bunch of documents for the process that we're all in agreement needs to be fixed. But we need to be ready to move quickly once we've got the improvements in place to say, this is what you do now. So that's a line we're trying to delicately walk.
Okay, thank you, that sounds great. My second question is, I know flexible zoning had been mentioned at some point as a potential option. I'm really interested to know more about that, and I'm wondering, is Very Done incorporating that possibility into their flow chart? Or is it?
So the Very Done flow charts are specific to the building permit process. Now there is that subset of the planning department process, but as part of the UDC rewrite, the planning department is going to have a, are you looking for me to say this? Working to get a sub-consultant to basically do this for their own processes, because planning also has processes that the process of, a subdivision, while it has an impact on a building permit, it is in and of itself its own process and entity that does not necessarily have to have a building permit concurrent application. Similarly, sometimes we get people who come in for a zoning change and they don't necessarily immediately have a building permit or a project in the pipeline. They're anticipating future sale of the property, they're anticipating some future development, and so they're going through the zoning permit process separately and apart from. So they will separately have a consultant do kind of this granular detail of their processes so that that can feed into Camiros's understanding of what needs to be improved in the process part of the zoning ordinance. And as far as your question regarding the conditional zoning, Bess is going to be providing an update on that in a few minutes. We're going to have an opportunity for building permits and planning, and Matthew's going to get thrown right into the fire and have to speak up about improvements that the departments have been working on based upon the adopted recommendation report. So I'm going to defer that to Bess in a few minutes. Chance.
Thank you. This is probably a two-part question. The first part, Very Done, is when you did your peer community study, are we properly staffed at Jefferson Parish? And do we pay our people what amount? I've asked this question probably going on 3 or 4 months. I don't think I've gotten an answer to that. So we can streamline, which y'all are doing an amazing job with the board's help. We can have the best process and procedures without properly staffed. We're in the same boat and we keep on rolling upstream. So I don't know if anyone's got that answer, or do we need to pay people more? Are we properly staffed in every department in Jefferson Parish? how do we look through other communities in Baton Rouge, on the North Shore, St. Tammany, per population, are we properly staffed and properly paid? I didn't hear that. I've been requesting this because, in my opinion, it starts at the front desk. Unless we have the proper people in place to be successful, we can make this streamlined as we can, but if we don't have the staff to help the residents in Jefferson Parish, I think we're going upstream.
Yes, so we did not do a full staffing study, that was not part of what our scope is, and I think that, so that would involve a detailed review of job descriptions, pay, that sort of thing. We heard some anecdotal information from staff about some staffing concerns, and pay concerns. So that may be something that the parish wants to do a deeper dive on. I would say, I think that there are quite a few things that could be improved in process that would increase capacity within the teams. And so probably giving the time for us to complete this work, for recommendations to be implemented, if there are changes made that really impact, to requirements that really impact workload or number of permits coming in, that could really impact staffing needs. So I think doing that at this point might be premature, but that's more for Juliet.
Right, and that's why I preface it. I don't know if Barry Dunn can comment on that. It's just a comment I come back to because I feel, don't know this, that's why I'm asking the board to join with me to find out this information. I think people at Jefferson Parish in different departments are wearing so many hats instead of hiring more staff. I think that runs into a problem. That's my feeling. I'd like to see facts on that. So I know Barry Dunn, y'all did an amazing job, but y'all probably weren't asked on staffing and salary pay. So that's why I guess that's a Jefferson Parish question, because I'm going to say it again. You can have the best process and procedures, but you don't have the staff to manage it. It's falling deaf ears.
I'll answer this, Julia. It's a very good question, and I will say, we have Mark and Shereen here. There are certainly areas of the parish that we are very understaffed and have a hard time finding staff. A couple of things play to that. Number one, the workforce. I'll look at accounting. You know, if you get out of college as an accountant, you can go work for a firm and you can work at home. And everybody wants to work at home and they want that. We have not offered that in the parish. I'm not going to offer that in my term of office. I don't know that it works for government. A lot of companies are now bringing their employees in, but that's always been a stickler for me because your neighbor who lives next to a government employee sees you fishing all day and why is my taxpayer? It just is a management problem for me in government. Particularly difficult for Juliet's group, Bess's group is, and you all have talked about this in your recommendation, they are a general fund department. So there are a lot of strains on the general fund. And the problem with the general fund, and this is one of the biggest issues with, I'm in a parish president group, we have state mandated costs, all the judicial, the clerks, all of these judicial pieces are straining the general fund, the jail, things that are not really related to our departments that state law requires. It comes out of parish money, are always pressuring the general fund. And so to do a big expansion, if we all want to do it, we've got to probably look at a new revenue source. But this is what I always said, fire services, the firefighters are picketing, they want into the general fund. We can't let that happen. So that's a big problem for us as we set up in Jefferson Parish, is that these departments which are critical to business, critical to the community, don't have their own revenue source in the way that drainage, recreation, library, they're critical, but they're, other general fund departments, Shereen, it's the risk, it's the accounting, it's all of those, but that is always difficult, being a general fund department. So the bigger picture is we would have to look for a new revenue source if we really want. Not saying we couldn't get a couple positions, but a real, probably getting them where they really should need to be, and where our processing time could get really reduced because we would have that capacity, is a big revenue problem for us. But having said that, we're gonna find money to, and we'll have to do the study to get these departments a couple more positions that they need. But it's the same way in accounting, it's the same way, I mean, we have a lot of departments that we need funding for.
Is it possible to get it passed through the council to have, what do you call it, opposite, general fund? Direct funds? Dedicated, thank you.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's something we can look at one day. It would take a vote of the people to do a dedicated fund, but I think this issue is just as important as a library or drainage or recreation that we have dedicated funds for. But I don't know the history. We've always just been a general fund department because they probably weren't doing this service back decades ago the way we do it now. I mean, you know, that's why we built right next to the canals, because nobody was paying attention to it. So, right, I mean, this field probably isn't as long as the library or recreation. And I'm guessing it just got pulled out of the general fund. Do you know the history why it was its own general?
I don't,
I think probably conceptually, the majority of tax-paying citizens might likely use recreation at some point in their lifetime, or a library. And the thought process probably was, this is more a user-based function and department, so are you going to tax every person in Jefferson Parish to fund the department?
Well, everyone needs a permit.
Right.
But everyone is paying into it because it's a sales tax based, and they are paying into it whether they realize it or not.
And then I also wanted to mention, Chance, to address your question about the analysis. When our personnel department does a study of a pay classification for any position, part of that analysis is a community comparison. And so they do look at what an entry-level building plan reviewer in St. Tammany makes, in Baton Rouge, in New Orleans, what is the average for the state of Louisiana, what's the national average. And so that is a part of the analysis that the personnel department does when they do those studies of whether or not to recommend an increase in the pay grade by classification. So that analysis is done, it is a part of the process, and one of this committee's recommendations is that we do a pay plan study of the positions within the building permits department. I don't know that an analysis of every position, but I think we can certainly agree that maybe our entry-level positions, you know, we can make that ask, and just see where we are so that we have that information to start from, to know where we are.
But I think the takeaway needs to be that they go hand in hand.
Chance.
Yes.
This and that.
Yes.
Again, one of the charts you put up, I'm just doing Jefferson Parish versus St. Tammany in this particular case. You put up the budget, I'm not sure I quote this correctly, we can make sure I took. Just a moment, please.
I think Carrie,
The department budget, Jefferson Parish, 6 million, number of permits, 5119, equals $1,309 per permit. If you do that same number in St. Tammany, it's about $800. So it's possible to get something out of this, or extrapolate something perhaps that might guide a decision. I don't know if I'm doing the right math or not, but
Wait, I'm sorry, Bruce, what does that imply?
it implies the cost of the department budget. I guess that means the permit department budget in Jefferson is $6,700,000 for 5,119 permits issued.
They're under budget,
And it equals $1,309 per permit. We're spending in Jefferson $1,309 per permit. That's extrapolated from that chart that you see on the screen right now. And in St. Tammany, and all of these things are different. We just heard all about
right.
Jefferson
I
Parish's
think
money.
I think that is an important caveat when we're just discussing this sort of very high level department budget number, is the things that go into this. There are the way that the way Jefferson Parish structures and their budget versus Lafayette or St. Tammany. I would be hesitant to get into an apples and apples comparison. Like I know for a fact in Jefferson Parish, we have certain pro rata costs that every department has to pay into, which is related to other internal funding. There's a cost that we pay for computer usage or phone usage. Whether or not those same costs are allocated the same way in St. Tammany or in Lafayette. So I would be a little hesitant to just say a blanket, their budget divided by staff or divided by permit without knowing, are there other things that are not included in cost of a budget in St. Tammany, but they are still getting the benefit of? Do they have to pay for their phones, or is that a other phone cost in St. Tammany's budget that doesn't get reflected in the department budget number? So I would be a little hesitant on that.
Excuse me, one more point.
Yes.
Another way to look at this, totally different from what I just said, is we're here in this room because our parish president asked for us to be here to examine a solution, find a solution. Jefferson Parish's intention is to lead the state, I think I'm speaking correctly here, and we do in many ways. And if we went back to industry, private industry, and said we need a funding source for a specific dedicated fund that would solve this problem. We went back to the industries and asked that question. Maybe we should ask them and see what they said. Chamber could ask that, the Architects Association, the Homeowners Association could ask that question. We would want to know what we're paying for.
Right. And I wanted to make a couple of clarifications on some things that Barry Dunn went through. So if we could go to the slide that referenced zoning clearances real quickly. One caveat I wanted to make here is the reason why Jefferson Parish has a separate zoning clearance requirement is because in East Baton Rouge and St. Tammany, and I believe in Lafayette, and Barry Dunn was going to confirm this for us, there's not a separate zoning clearance required because those jurisdictions issue the occupational license. In Jefferson Parish, your occupational license is issued by the sheriff's office, a completely separate agency, and as part of their requirement, they require a zoning clearance. So Sam touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to make it very clear that it's not just that that zoning clearance is done through the permitting review in those other jurisdictions, it's that because they ultimately issue the occupational license to opening business. In Jefferson Parish, what we unfortunately find is a lot of people just go straight to the sheriff's office, pay their occupational license, open their business, and they have never come back to parish government for the zoning clearance or to find out, oh, my project actually needs a tenant build out, I've got a change of use that changes my parking requirements. In those other jurisdictions, they can't open their business without going through the government. And so that's an important caveat to understand. It's not just that they do the review during the building permit process, but that review is a part of opening their business. The second thing, if we could go to the slide that referenced elevator renewals and third parties. So it's not accurate that only Jefferson Parish requires the elevation maintenance certificate or elevator inspections. That is actually a statewide requirement, but this is something that Jefferson Parish and no jurisdiction will be doing anymore because now elevator certifications will all be done through the State Fire Marshal's office. We have provided them our list of all of our renewals. So all commercial elevator maintenance and initial installations will all be inspected and reviewed by the State Fire Marshal's office now. So I just wanted to let you all know that. Anybody in the room who is an architect or involved in building buildings that have elevators, that's now going to be strictly done through the State Fire Marshal's office. And then one other thing to know about third-party inspectors is, yes, Jefferson Parish requires an additional registration, but St. Tammany does not accept third-party inspections at all. And so they don't require registration because they don't allow third parties to do inspections that are accepted by the jurisdiction. So that's just another caveat that's important to understand. All right, I think you had 2 more slides, Carrie and Sam.
Yes, so we just wanted to make you aware of what's coming next. So from those diagrams, like I said, we pulled out challenges and opportunities for improvement. So we'll be working with the Parish project management team to confirm primary challenges at high level understanding of what the big issues are, and from there developing specific recommendations for improvement. Part of that, like I mentioned, is developing an implementation plan, looking at best practices to guide how those recommendations could be implemented in the parish, and then pulling all of that information together into a final report, which will then be presented. Any questions on next steps or general questions for our team?
I just had one question. You had mentioned that the processes are going to help maybe with less workload on the employees. What is one of the biggest things that you found? Could you give an example of that?
Sure. One of the things I think is pretty typical that comes up is communication. So we're both within teams looking at how communication is happening and how the system could be used better. And then as Sam mentioned when we were talking about review requirements, just how that information that's getting out to the public, I think there are a lot of opportunities for improving clarity, more details, so that what those applications coming in are more complete. Those are 2 big things that I can think of off the top of my head. Sam, did you want to add anything to that?
Just the general requirements for staff to go back to the applicant. Anything that's not being in a timely manner communicated to the applicant or to a staff reviewer with regards to, something being uploaded. So we found that that's an internal opportunity, and that's kind of streamlining that takes workload off of staff, because if you can only do it once or at least minimize the amount of backtracking necessary. That's something that we heard from staff specifically.
So I think we're a very visual crowd here. And so I'm wondering at the very end, when you do your final report, could we see something where not only do you give your recommendations, but a side-by-side chart, maybe black and red, and tell us exactly what you're recommending to be changed, and also the recommendation, so we can kind of get a feel if we're going to agree with it or not, because maybe we like the way it's being done already, maybe we don't, but I'd like to have something like that, please.
So before we let Mary Dunn hop off of this call and proceed with the rest of the meeting, well, before we end, we're going to decide when you all want to meet again. Is there anything that you would like Barry Dunn to come back to you with before they produce a final recommendation report, or recommend, implementation? So is there any specific product that you would like to see before it's finalized? And that may inform when you decide to meet again.
Julianne, I think a draft copy of what they have found or what they're recommending before it's submitted for review and approval, I think would be helpful for us to look at.
Vincent is suggesting that the committee receive a copy of the draft final product before it's finalized.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that.
would it make sense for us to share at the next meeting, whatever that might be, kind of the draft recommendations before we build out a more detailed implementation plan for that?
Yes, yes.
They're in agreement to that. Okay. All right, well, I want to thank Carrie and Sam for their time joining us this morning. Y'all are welcome to stay on and listen, but the next part of our agenda is to have the departments provide some updates. So I'm going to leave the meeting open, and y'all are welcome to stay or drop off as your schedule allows. We don't have any final questions from the committee for Carrie or Sam. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Juliet, just next time, let's make sure we get the printed PowerPoint presentation to everybody before, so that was
All right, now we're going to have the update from the Parish Department, and Bess is first.
Hear me? There we go, great. So, planning would like to just provide a very brief update on our activities since some of the meetings, and just to give you an idea of what we've been working on. To answer Stacy's question about the flexible zoning, which is known as conditional zoning. So we did put those regulations into place. That was part of those interim standards that we came to you guys about 4 months ago, maybe, so either November or December, I believe. November, because they were enacted in December. Those were the interim standards that we discussed, a part of a package that we went to council for approval to introduce. Part of that package also, to Juliet's speaking to it earlier about the overlay districts, and to answer some of Ruth's questions. We attempted in those interim standards to bring some of those overlay districts together so that we're not back and forth between the MUC and the CPZ, which is not only a pain point for the development community, but quite honestly a pain point for the planners as they go through that trying to apply those regulations. So we've brought the majority of those two overlay districts together so that we have just that one set of landscaping, signage regulations to make things easier for both the planners and the development community. Those interim regulations are posted online on the planning department's website, very easy to access. And we're happy to share if anyone would like a copy of those as well. No, those were enacted via a resolution, so they are not codified in Unicode in Chapter 33 or Chapter 40, which is where everyone is used to going to, but as interim regulations are captured within that resolution. Ruth? So for the planners, I feel like they're much happier. We feel like it's more efficient as far as the review. For the conditional zoning related to some of the more flexible zoning and the uses, we have had several inquiries into this process, and what I feel like, and I think the planners too, what I feel like is circumstances or developments that have come to us that normally the council wouldn't have an issue with, the development community, the neighborhoods probably wouldn't have an issue with. I'll give you an example. One was a neighborhood store that had been there forever, right? A small little mom and pop operation like that again don't fit neatly into this Euclidean zoning code that we have, which is a very strict, regimented, separation of uses code that, doesn't fit some of the developments and the neighborhoods that we have in Jefferson Parish now. So I feel the conditional zoning is working very well for both the development community and for staff. We have had several requests about accessory dwelling units as well, and I do believe actually we got our first application in. One of the improvements that the planning department has been able to do since a few of our last meetings is we've completed an application specific to the conditional zoning. Originally, we were thinking it would just be another map amendment application,
But because of the uniqueness of this process and what is required and what we need to really do a thorough review before we make that recommendation to council, we decided that we did need a specific application just for conditional zoning. So we've created that, it's live now, it's on our website, and we're working with MGO to get that posted to their website as well.
Does
Any
that
other-
zoning go with the property if it's sold, or how does that work?
No, so if the property is sold, then the new owner will need to come back through for that. Because we want to make sure there aren't any changes.
So that's the old grandfather provisions, you know, where you've had business that's been in an area that doesn't meet current zoning, there may have been numerous other zoning applications to it, that doesn't come into play anymore?
No, it does.
But it's relying upon the neighborhood, if there's a residential neighborhood.
No, so the grandfathering provisions, the non-conforming provisions, if the use is out of use for over a year, then it loses that status. So this neighborhood grocery had been out of use, I think, for 3 to 4 years. So they unfortunately had lost that ability to be grandfathered in because the use had been out of use for so long. Those provisions are still in there, though. Uses that are currently being occupied and used that maybe do not meet the current zoning because the zoning has been changed or the regulations have been changed, those enjoy a non-conforming status as long as they continue in use and do not stop the use for over a year. You're welcome. And if there's ever a question about that, the zoning administrator can provide a non-conforming status determination. And we have done that for several businesses in the past.
So does that mom and pop have to go through PAB?
Yes,
So it
sir.
goes through
The same process as every other legislative approval, yes.
Okay. And they're gonna have a neighborhood meeting beforehand?
Yes, they will be required to have the neighborhood meeting, and we've worked with our applicants and designed a template for them to use to send out for like a letter. You know, that's something that they asked about, like, well, do you have a template we could use to send the letter out? So we've worked with them, we've provided a template now with the application that they can use, because again, the requirement for a neighborhood meeting is a very new requirement, so we want to help out as much as possible managing that process.
Okay, so there's a protocol for that neighborhood?
Yes, it is within our interim standards, called out specific. There's a certain time frame that you have to have the meeting in, you need to have an agenda, things that you can provide to us to show that you've had that meeting.
Great.
Gus, if you can forward that revision document that you have to me.
Okay.
So I can keep you from having to go talk to the board for about 2 hours. Then I can, you know, let them come up to date on what you're trying to do and where you are with that.
Okay, yeah, and I'm happy to come talk to the home builders if they have additional questions. I know we had met with you guys to discuss the accessory dwelling unit regulations, but I certainly am happy to come back and have more conversations regarding those.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll let them understand it, digest it, and then we can do that. That's great.
That sounds good.
Bess, does the conditional zoning apply when the non-conforming status is lost due to 50% of greater destruction?
When the non-conforming status is
So, in
lost.
other words, if the mom and pop store had
Oh, if
suffered a
it
fire.
exceeds it's non-conforming, I see. Yes, I think at that point, we would allow someone to go through the conditional zoning process to see if they could get approval for additions and then to, you know, make that non-conforming use a legal use.
So this is different from spot zoning, because, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm really asking this. Spot zoning is a permanent change to the zoning, which people don't like. But
Correct.
this is a temporary change to the zoning based on that specific business.
No, so the conditional zoning, the wonderful thing about it is that it doesn't change the underlying zoning. We're trying to get away from that because that is a concern that neighbors have, because once you change that zoning, under our code, you allow the range of uses permitted within that zoning district, correct? So that is generally what gives people heartburn. C2 is a prime example because it allows bars. And the concern is like, yes, maybe you say that you are going to open up a restaurant or something of this nature, but once you are rezoned to C2, it allows any of those uses permitted within that district. The conditional zoning leaves the underlying zoning alone, and it permits the use and that use only
It is tied to an ordinance specifying what the use is. It is tied to a site plan showing the structure that the use is going to be done within, the limits, where that structure is set up, if there's any landscaping that the planning department may require based on the use and the neighboring properties. So the conditional zoning is really focused on the use and the built environment and leaves the underlying zoning alone.
So we don't already have a conditional use process that somebody could apply for in places? How is this different if we do?
Sure, so we have a special permitted use process within some of our zoning districts, which is still a permitted use, they just have additional regulations placed on them, and they do require council approval at the outset. This is different because it allows for a wider range of uses than that special permitted use. It is similar, like thinking through it theory-wise, but the special permitted uses are each called out within the specific zoning district. So once again, if you aren't zoned for that district, then you don't have the option to do that special permitted use. In this instance, it is more, what is the use that you are looking to do as opposed to the zoning? I know, yes ma'am, I gotta wrap up, sorry guys. Just a quick update. So planning has implemented additional staff training. We have bi-weekly site plan review working sessions to allow some of our newer planners and our more tenured planners to work together. We are looking at doing additional public outreach, filling some of our staffing gaps. One thing I will say to Chance's question and continued question, which I do appreciate, the subcontractor that Camaros has brought on to do that audit process, to audit the planning department site plan review process and some of our other processes. One of the reports that they look to provide to come out of that is a staffing analysis and recommendations. So I think we'll see that when they wrap that up, and we'll have more information once they've actually come on board and we start working with them. But they're very familiar with MGOs, so that I think will add to that process and sort of help them move along very quickly as they have that familiarity. They're also going to work with us to design some KPI reports so that we are able to have ongoing reports on our website kind of showing processes and what we're doing and how efficient we can be. And with that, I will let Ms. Latrice update you.
Yeah.
One thing while she's coming, I did want to just reiterate what I put on the screen is the planning department's page on the parish website, which includes a page specifically for interim development standards, including the conditional zoning. And so if you are ever looking for an actual copy of an interim regulation that's in place, they will all be available on this page. And these links here are the resolutions that implemented these, and then the planning department provides a quick summary of what that interim standard includes. So if you're ever looking for that information, it is available on the parish website.
Good morning. Just to give you a quick update that we are working, good morning. Just to give you a quick update that we are steadily working to improve the customer portal side for MGO. Right now, what I have done for our side, the building side, was to add, for instance, I'll show you, a application preview button for anyone who wants to know what they get into before they actually apply for the permits. This is for trades along with residential and commercial. Also, I am working on, working on the commercial side of things, whereas I also did the application preview, but I'm doing descriptions for each application right now to give an overview of what you're looking to apply for and what that application is for. So I'm doing that along with working streamlining the questions for each application. I took out a few questions regarding smoking that wasn't relevant to a lot of the applications. So I'm doing that as well too. So every day I'm constantly doing something to improve it. Right now, my next thing I'm going to do is the residential side of it, and then so forth and so on, just to give you a good, quick update of what we're doing.
Not really a question, just a quick comment. I probably should have mentioned it before. A little bit did, just so on some of the letters in Jefferson Parish, like paying invoices, it still has the link to My Government Online, MGO Connect. And if like we had saying somebody's trying to pay a resub application, like I can't get into it, I'm clicking the link, it doesn't work. So y'all might just want to look at that. Make sure that, because I know I had that issue where I was going to the old site, not the one that has a lot more capabilities, so just a heads up.
And that's the invoice that's being mailed to email?
Digital, sent as a PDF. So then that actually has a link that someone can click.
Okay, so I thought they had updated it, but I'll look into it.
Okay, it just, this site is way better than the old one, so make sure everybody's using it.
So one thing I do want to ask the committee, particularly those of you who are what I'm going to call a power user of the system, if you have specific recommendations for description of projects or files or things that you, as you're going through this and you say, it would really be helpful if this included this information, those of you who have that intimate knowledge of the system and what it looks like now, please communicate and feel free to communicate directly with Latrice to make those suggestions on, as she's going through this process of the files and documents that she's associating with each permit type, the descriptions that she's putting it on there. If as you're using it, you see a change and you say, oh, that's worded good, but I think it could be even clearer, please feel free to contact me, contact Latrice, because as you can see, these are changes she can directly make without us having to communicate with MGO. And so these are all things that are in our control to better communicate requirements. So we can upload, and she's working on, examples of specific forms that you might need to attach. So if somebody's like, I don't know what they mean by a plot plan or a landscape plan, we now have this ability to upload a typical landscape plan that you can say, oh, that's what I need to get from my architect or my horticulturalist or whoever is authorized to create landscape plans. So these are the little tiny improvements that we're able to make at our own level that I think addresses some of that what do I need to do question. And so we're taking the steps. Sometimes we think we're speaking clearly about what's required, and the person on the other end says you're still using words I don't understand. So please give us that feedback as we make these improvements. If you think it could be even better, tell us, and we will work to get that done.
Like a generator.
Yes, I mean, the generator application is a very good one.
And this one,
So this is the commercial generator. It's a little different, but I think for residential generators, I think you're right. We've got some great information from when we changed our processes. We could actually attach that information here. The same thing with the roofing permit requirements. We've already built those instruction sheets. It's just a matter of attaching them to the roofing permit application to say, this is specifically what you need to do.
yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Question on, I think it's great you created a separate application for the trades, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, but what I'm hearing from our customers there is that they file and then the parish doesn't allow them to pay for it for 2 or 3 days. What exactly is happening behind the scenes? Are y'all reviewing the application or?
With the trade filings are now, with all our trade filings are now set on automation. Meaning once the clerk takes in the trade filing, they have to select a button to say add fees. Once that button is selected, the system will send the contractor an invoice to pay. once the contractor pays, the system will then verify the fees are paid and then issue the permit to that contractor.
So
So all those 3 steps are automated.
All right, so that's not personnel dependent. You're saying that the application will generate the invoice for whatever they have to pay?
It generates the invoice once the clerk selects the button, which is manually, to say, hey, add these fees.
There it is.
I added the fees. The clerk has to do that button in order for the system to do the next 3 steps. Yes. So when you run into that, call me, let me know. So I can make sure that the clerks are definitely making sure that they have to select that button in order for the system to flow correctly. Yes. Please let me know.
I hear it often, so.
Okay.
And make sure you tell Mark which trades exactly. Let's see, engineering, do you have anything you want to share?
Yeah.
All right, good morning. We've been working on 2 main updates. One, we have made some initial revisions to what we formerly called our subdivision manual. And those initial revisions will be online in the coming days. It'll now be titled a development manual and requirements for public works, so it's clear on what to be expected. We are also going through the manual in detail to make sure everything's clear and concise, and making those revisions as well. And then our second main update is we are working on getting the sidewalk and driveway permit into the MyPermit Now system for both existing structures as well as new developments, et cetera. So those are our main 2 updates. Questions? All right, y'all are good.
Just when we thought we were going to eliminate driveway permits, but that's not.
I think that's the updates from the parish for this morning.
All right, now we need to talk about the future meetings and some, we have some proposed dates, but I think before we even look at those dates, we need to be able to have the draft of the Barry Dunn for us to review before we confirm these dates. But the future dates we have that we're looking at are May 7th, May 14th, and June 4th. You'll be back in this at the East Bay facility. But Juliet, when do you think we'll get that draft report?
I'm trying to be better about practicing what I preach about using the microphone too. So the current estimated timeline for Barry Dunn to have a draft of the recommendation report is sometime in May. So it may be appropriate for this committee to choose to meet either early June or mid to late May. I think that's a realistic timeline.
I guess to give us time to review and do the things that we're going to do, maybe we do need to do the June, so we have time to discuss.
Just to say, we'll be back here on the East Bank strictly because Barry Dunn will have to join us again via Teams. And at this point, I don't think the West Bank Library facility has the same audiovisual setup. So that's just the one reason why we'll be back here on the East Bank. It's just for the room capacity to be able to have the same discussions we had today.
But we need to coordinate with what's available here. So we have a
Yes.
June 4th.
Yes.
Is there a date later in June or?
Well, we can actually just check the library's availability.
I think giving us, 2 weeks to review the draft is sufficient enough time?
Yes.
Frank?
I'm sorry,
2 weeks.
too many things to do at one time. What's that? I'm sorry, Charles?
2 weeks to review the draft, that's enough time for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we can have discussion and get some answers.
about anything later? Because if we get the report around May 15th, that will give us the 2 weeks before June 4th. If it comes at the end of May, do they have anything after the 15th?
I'll just tell them May 15th for deadline for report.
Huh?
May 15th is for the deadline.
Okay. All right, is everybody okay with the June 4th meeting back here? All right, then that's what we'll do, June 4th.
I have a conflict, but if you don't want to.
All right, any more questions? If not, we're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.